Hi, thanks for tuning in. Today, we're going to show you how to set up a machine profile for the CR-X in Cura 3.4.1, and we're also going to show you how to do a multicolor slice. Let's get started. All right, I've got Cura 3.4.1 open, and I've currently selected a Creality CR-10. We'll go through the process of adding a new printer. Now I should mention that on the USB key there is software. It's a strange version of Cura, it says 1504.6. Rather than installing a different version of Cura for every printer that I have, I prefer to just configure my default installation of Cura. What I will do is cheat a little bit here. They have an executable that will add a profile for the CR-X to their version of Cura. They outline this process in their documentation. So they say install this, then install this. And then it shows you that there's a CR-X entry in here. Unfortunately, the ini file that they have is considered legacy, so it won't directly import into here. But we'll use it to kind of get the details of the printer as far as offsets and size and such. So running this application, it's in Chinese. You'll want to hit this button here, and then it will go through the install process. And in this case, I've already installed it, so it's asking me, do I want to overwrite those files, yes or no? So it installs to Program Files x86 if you're on a 64-bit machine. Otherwise, this would just be Program Files. Cura 15046, Resources Machine Profiles. And inside here, we have an ini file. If we open it up, we can see the machine properties. And then there's a bunch of profile properties here. So I'll steal some of these options here. We can see that the width is 310 by 310. 405 millimeters high. We're not using 0 in the center of the bed. We're using it in the front left corner, which is kind of normal. We're using Marlin. We have 2 extruders, and it says that the offsets are 0 and 0 because it's actually one hot end, one nozzle, instead of dual nozzles side by side where they would be offset from each other. And then this stuff is just kind of the printing profile options. So we'll steal some of these values. Let's go back to Cura. Back in Cura, we're going to add a new printer. Go to Settings, Printer, Add Printer. Normally I'd choose something like a CR-10 to give us a good starting point, but that locks us down to only having one extruder. So we're going to choose Custom. And we'll go entirely custom, and I'll call this New CR-X. Hit Add Printer. And wait for that to be reflected up here. There we go. So this is where we're going to steal some of those properties from the ini file. So we can see that we're using Marlin, which is already selected. We have a rectangular bed. In this case, it says 310 by 310 by 405. Machinist center 0 is false, so that's not checked, that's normal. We have a heated bed, and we have 2 extruders. 2. So I will choose to change these to 310 by 310 by 405. 310. In the background, you can actually see it reflecting the changes. It's a little bit laggy. There we go. That's 405. Okay. For now, I'm going to leave these values. I've changed it to 2 extruders. I'm going to change the start and end G code. I'm stealing this from my CR-10 profile. And this is not appropriate. And so let's go to the extruders tab. So we see when I change that to 2, there's now 2 tabs up here. So extruder 1 is a 0.4 millimeter nozzle, 1.75. And extruder 2 is the exact same. They're coming out of the same nozzle. I'm not going to put any start and end G code in these for now. With that set, let's hit finish. So now up here, you can see that I have extruder 1 and 2, just so that we can see them reflected in the slice. We'll just change these colors so that they're not both orange. I'm just going to choose another material here. Oops. There we go. And one of these other PLAs. Here, green. Okay. I'm going to use a profile that I already have set up for a CR10. This is for a Titan arrow, so I'll want to change the retraction here. We'll do 7 or 8 millimeters. 70. There's a section now, because we have dual extrusion, there's a section called that. Make sure that you can view that. You may have to configure your setting visibility to expose these options. I'll import a couple STLs just so that we can see where the prime tower is. So if we open this, I'll go to the USB key here. We'll have a link to these 2 STLs in a second, or at the in the description, I mean. Move them around. Okay. So the prime tower, this tells you where on the bed the prime tower is going to be. I've just chosen some arbitrary values. We can move it later. We want to make sure that it's enabled. In my case, I've chosen a circle. We're going to wipe after the nozzle switch. And the purge volume. So this purge volume here, I believe this is specified in here. So they say the color changing column volume size setting, set it to no less than 140 millimeters cubed. So color setting. There. So that's this value here. It's set extremely small. So this is the value they're asking us to set it to no less than 140 millimeters cubed. We also want to go and set the retract. So this no less than 100 millimeters, they call it double nozzle switching retreat. That's under the material options. Nozzle switch retraction distance. So they've said 100 millimeters, that's what it's set to, and it's set to 40 millimeters a second, which matches their documentation here. Now they say their normal retraction, they want to use 6, I've set it to 8. 0.2 millimeter layers, travel speed of 60, they say 20 millimeters a second for my bottom layer. I'm going to use my kind of standard CR10 speeds. Outer shell speeds, minimum layer time, and cooling fan. So that's all kind of normal stuff. So as you see, I've inserted an STL. The way you need to do dual color is to have kind of an STL carved up into 2 new STLs. And then we'll merge them together. So we'll want to choose which extruder is going to print each of these. So right now we can see they're both green. They're both going to be printed by extruder number 1. So for this section, I want this to be printed in extruder number 2's color. So I'll choose to print that model in extruder number 2, and it changes color to reflect that. And then I want to merge the 2 of these into 1. So if you highlight them both by holding down Shift and clicking on both, I will merge the models. There we go. So now that's what the end result is going to look like, and this is where our purge block is going to be. I have a feeling that 140 millimeters cubed of purge block is going to be more than enough, probably a little bit wasteful, but at least we won't have any color bleed as it switches from color to color. Some of these layers, as you can see, are going to switch color quite a few times. There's green over here, and then this other color, and then green again. There we go. We can see that in one layer there's technically 4 color changes. And each time it changes color, it needs to dump some plastic on that purge block. So I'm going to do a skirt a few millimeters away from the item. I'm not generating any supports, and I'm not actually using a spiralized outer contour like you would with a normal vase. This is already hollowed out, and it's definitely thicker than a single extrusion width. I'm keeping my fan on. My fan's going to come on at layer 3. Let's just quickly go over some of the other settings. I'm going 70 millimeters a second. For the bottom, I'm changing that to 35 or 50% the normal speed. So this is my build plate temperature. 60 is probably a little bit on the hot side. That's normally what I run on my CR10 with PEI. And for this material, I know it prints pretty well at 220. We're using neat filaments. That's the other thing is it's definitely easiest to keep both of the PLA brands or both the materials the same. Otherwise, it needs to heat up and cool down in between the different color changes. So just to make my life a little bit easier, I'm keeping those the same. So we don't actually want to do any kind of infill here. We want to make this completely solid. So I've done 2 walls. I could just increase this number so that it's considered all walls. And we definitely want to allow thin walls. So there we go, print thin walls. And if I just do a prepare, we can see a likely bogus estimate as to how long it's going to take. If I go to layer view, we can see the very large purge block. So this is kind of a priming area. So it's going to prime, and then it's going to purge out the remainder of the color as it switches. And we can see, in some layers, as I was describing, there's green, then there's yellow here. So I'm curious if it'll do all the green and then all the green and then switch to minimize the amount of color switches, or if it's going to just print one, switch the other again, and switch again. Hopefully it's efficient. We'll see what Cura does here. We could actually play and see what happens if we wanted to. But I'll wait to see it for real. I don't think there's anything else here that we need to check. So I've got the info set to 100% just in case those walls were not enough. We could just do your normal walls and 100% infill for between them, but it's not very thick. So I think that's about it. We may want to Zed Hop when it retracts. Otherwise, I could see it stopping as it goes to do the color change, and when it does that long retraction to bring the filament up through the Y kind of splitter on the hot end, it'll sit there and maybe cook the surface. So most of this isn't going to be super negatively impacted by Zed Hops. If you have a lot of moving between parts, every time it retracts to move between parts, Zed hopping can sometimes cause stringing. So I'm going to look up hop, Zed hop when retracted, and I believe they actually gave a recommendation for how high to Zed hop, so let's take a look. Okay, in the Cura 15 user guide that they provided in the software and USB driver folder on the USB stick, I found this section under expert settings, and they mentioned the Zed hop when retracting. They say when a retraction is done, the head is lifted this amount to travel over the print. The value of this works well. So just a tiny amount. I may opt to leave it off. Yeah, why not? And hopping after the extruder switch, and we're going to hop over printed parts. Okay, so let's re-slice that. And let's just take a look at how the first layer is going to be printed. Okay. So let's play layer 1. It starts by drawing the skirt that I asked it to do, a few millimeters away from the object. Let's fast forward this. And then it begins by printing extruder 1. And then it does the skirt and a purge. Make sure that all the green is out. Switches color, and then does the other half of the base. So as we can see it go up. Oh, we've lost our colors. There we go. As it goes up, you can see it does that over and over, purging, alternating green, yellow, green, yellow. So let's save this to the drive and go to the printer. So if you're facing the front of the printer, the left extruder is extruder 1. In our case, we have yellow going in there. So that's the first one that's going to extrude. Let's feed that all the way in, right to the bottom. And then, in our case, red is extruder 2. And we'll feed that in just about 1.5 centimeters or so inside the collar. Okay. And then it will handle the retracting and switching of those filaments with the 100 millimeter retraction distance. Well, here we are a few days later, and as you can see, we have a masterpiece of sorts. We're a few days later, not because this print took a few days, but because this takes about 8 hours or so, and we tried 3 times to get this thing to print to completion. It almost seems as if the hot end is getting stuck on the purge block, and we end up with a pile of spaghetti. So we're gonna have to go through the time-lapse video footage, kind of get a feel for what's happening there. But as for what it did produce, we definitely have some tuning to do. You can see little globs at kind of the start or end points of particular line segments here. And this is kind of a complex model because there's multiple color changes within one layer, multiple start and stop points. We also have a little bit of bleeding of the red into the yellow, so that tells us that we need to do a little bit more purging, especially when we're trying to purge the red out of the hot end and replace it with yellow filament. We don't seem to have that problem as we go from yellow to red, probably because the red kind of overpowers that color. So there's definitely some improvements to be done, and obviously bed adhesion is kind of our biggest problem if there's not some sort of mechanical reason why it's getting caught on this. We've tried leveling it many times. We know leveling's not the issue. The layer laid it down perfectly flat and even. In sample tests, it was very difficult to get the purge block even off the bed. I had to kind of hack at it with a scraper, trying not to damage the surface. And that was only after adding Elmer's Extreme glue stick to the print bed. Without anything added to the print bed, I couldn't get it to stick at 60, 65, 50 degrees. We tried all kinds of different ranges, and we did many test prints, only a portion of the height just to kind of test for good bed adhesion. And it seemed to be fine on this last print with a good coating of glue stick, but something has still gone wrong. So we'll spend some time trying to get that to work, tune our retraction settings, maybe our start and stop or coast and wipe, and we'll get back to you with a future video. One last thing that I noticed is, being that this is a largely hollow model with just a couple walls and zero infill, the purge block, because of the number of color changes in this model, is significantly heavier than the model itself. And although the model didn't fully complete, let's kind of compare how much each weighs. So the model itself is 30 grams, and the purge block is 31 grams. It maybe just feels heavier because it's denser, being one solid chunk. And on the purge block, you can actually see that as we're purging the yellow out and replacing it with the red, we're purging way more than we need to. The yellow is kind of gone the moment it starts purging, and then we have a very large infill of red. We use the stock suggested amount of 140 cubic millimeters for the purge, so maybe we can pull that back a little bit. I'm not sure if we can adjust the purge for each individual color, add more when purging from red to yellow, and maybe save some when we go from yellow to red. Hopefully you found that informative. Stay tuned as we do more prints on the CR-X, and remember to like and subscribe when we upload more content. Thanks for watching.